There we go. Now it's working. Cool. All right. Well, with that being said, what we are talking about today is keeping up with quicker hikers, which is a subject which a lot of people don't really think about initially. A lot of people kind of, it's not one of those massive, pressive thing compared to like pack carrying or like or whatever it may be. But it is something that I talk about with hikers every single week. It is something that does drive a lot of people a little bit crazy, and we're going to be diving into it today. Now, hiking, when it comes down to it, it very, very rarely is a race. And probably if you're hiking with Camino Women, it's probably not going to be an event where you have to kind of hit certain like crazy time speeds or whatever it may be. And for many hikers out there, the concept of increasing your speed just does seem a little bit unnecessary. Like for a lot of people who don't have an issue with this, they're like, well, why would I care? Like, I'm just out to enjoy myself, whatever it may be. But when it comes down to it, if you are a naturally slower hiker, and you will know if you fall into this category, and if you're just naturally a little bit slower than some other people, speed can be a pressing issue. It can actually be something that causes a lot of trouble, causes a lot of mental stress, causes a lot of physical stress, and it is something that like a lot of people don't talk about, but it can be a bit of an issue. So today we're going to be diving into this and just exploring a few strategies to help. Now, one thing I will sort of say, if anyone on this call is like, oh, you know what, I've never had issues with this, or maybe someone's watching the recording, like, well, you know what, I've never had issues with speed, like, whatever it may be. In all honesty, the strategies I'm going to talk you through, they will still be beneficial. They will just allow you to perform better and quicker and that, and just feel a bit more comfortable in your normal situation. So as much as this is honed in towards people who are maybe naturally slower, it's still going to be very beneficial for pretty much any hiker out there. Now, why can it be tough to be a slower hiker? Like, we can sometimes, if we've been in this situation and if you turn up to this presentation, you probably have had some like, self-experience around this, potentially, and it's, not much fun. But I want to break it down because there are a few things that's definitely worth shining a spotlight on. Now, number one, when it comes down to being a slower hiker, what people tend to end up having compared to quicker hikers, whatever it may be, is if we're out with a group, we're trying to keep up with people, we tend to end up expending more energy than the other hikers, purely for the fact that when it comes down to the natural speed that we walk, we all have a natural speed, which if we don't think about, if we're, not paying attention, we will just naturally fall into. And everyone's speed is going to be slightly different. Now, essentially what tends to happen is pretty much, it's like 99% accurate, is the natural speed that we all fall into as an individual tends to be the most energy efficient speed that we individually will do. Because the body doesn't like to expend energy. It really, really wants to conserve energy any way it can. And essentially, just as a natural evolution, the body's like, hey, whatever we walk at, that's going to be our most energy efficient thing. So the tricky thing when it comes down to this is if we're out on a hike with a group with friends who are quicker than us and we're trying to keep up with them, we're going to push out of that energy efficient pace. And we're going to burn more energy, basically. It's not the end of the world. It's not like absolutely going to ruin your hike or anything like that, but it is something you need to be aware of because you are going to be churning through a bit more energy than the people who are at their own natural pace. Now, and this ends up just being slow hikers will burn more energy on a hike, typically. On top of this is, to add to this is if we are going a little bit quicker than we're used to, and if we're working at what we call a higher relative intensity, meaning it's not our natural pace, just a little bit quicker than whatever. This can sometimes, doesn't happen to everyone, but for some people it can also affect our appetite. And if we're working at a higher intensity, it can suppress our appetite a little bit, which means we end up actually eating less, which means we end up taking less energy in. So we're burning more energy and eating less energy, and it ends up being a whole kerfuffle. So that's one thing that is definitely worthwhile paying attention to. Now, number two is less rest time. And I'm sure a lot of people have had this experience in the past. But, what tends to happen when we've got different speeds on a hike, faster hikers will go out, they'll do their thing, and they'll go, it typically happens on when we're climbing up a hill. They'll climb up a hill, they'll get to the top, and they're like, all right, now's time to rest for the rest of the group to catch up. We'll wait for the slower hikers. So the people at the top, the faster hikers, they get to the top, they get plenty of rest and ready to recover. The slower hikers, unfortunately, in a lot of situations, they will get to the top of the hill. They may get 30 seconds or 60 seconds to rest, and then all of a sudden, the fast hikers are ready to go again because they've been resting for a lot of time. So you end up just basically having less rest than the people who are a little bit quicker, which is just not much fun. There's a funny expression for it, a funny word for it. I can't remember what it's called. I was trying to rack in my brains before trying to put in the presentation, but it happens all the time. I have been guilty of it in the past when I wasn't like before I actually paid attention to this stuff. And it's not very nice. And it does then end up getting us a little bit more time. And also increased mental stress. For a lot of people, like, there is a lot of self-consciousness around this before a hike leading in. If you're going in a group environment, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to keep up with people, or oh my gosh, I'm going to be holding people up, or whatever it may be. that can be a little bit stressful. Same thing during a hike. If you're constantly all day thinking about this, it can be, mental stress. And one thing about mental stress when it comes down to our physical exertion is it can actually make things physically harder. When we're mentally all up in our brain, when we're sort of getting a bit negative or getting a bit worried, that can actually affect us physically. So for these three different reasons, they kind of come together, making, a bit of a perfect storm when it comes down to this. Now, when it comes down to actually keeping up with quicker hikers and making a bit of a change here, there's a few things we're going to look into. Ultimately, today we're going to dive into two big categories. Number one, training and preparation, which is what I do every day, what I love, and I'm always going to be talking about that. And we're also going to talk through some simple on-trail strategies you can do. So in the weeks and the months leading up to whatever hike you have, you can apply the training, and when you're actually out on the trail, there'll be a few things you can do, which are pretty straightforward. Now, on the training side of things, the principles of training to increase speed and essentially just getting us in a position where we can keep up with these quicker hikers. Ultimately, there's two kind of areas of this that we want to look into. Number one, it involves improving our capabilities to go faster and essentially just improving the ability of your body to actually access these quicker speeds, improving the ability of your body to actually be able to sustain these quicker speeds. Because, we're all probably aware if we've gone out and done like a power march or a power walk and done the old Kath and Kim around the neighborhood, we know that's tough. You can sustain that for a little bit, but it's tricky. It's easier said than done. So improving our ability to actually do this is important. Now, on top of that is basically what we want to do is we want to expose the body to these types of speeds as well. So not only give us the ability to do this, but actually just help this type of quicker stuff feel a bit more natural. So it's not a full-blown power march. It's not something you have to pay attention to all the time, but it does feel a bit more natural. So essentially we're going to dive into that here. Now, first of all, increasing your capabilities for speed. Essentially, when we are hiking faster, when we're walking faster, our muscles need to produce significantly more force, meaning our feet muscles, our calf muscles, our shin muscles, our quads, our hamstrings, our glutes, our hip flexors, all of that, they just need to produce a little bit more force every single step we take. Pretty straightforward. Now, this can lead up to is if we're doing more force, and sustain that for a long period of time, this can lead to early fatigue, can lead to aches and pains, calves get sore, feet get sore, Achilles get sore, stuff like that, and it's not much fun. So to combat this, essentially the simplest thing we can kind of do to help our body deal with this and produce more force and make it not quite as difficult is strength training. If you've been on my sort of my presentations, I think every single presentation I've talked about strength training one way or another. I'm a massive advocate for it. It can just make such a big difference. If we can build up the capabilities, the tolerance and resilience of our muscles and basically just get them feeling a little bit more capable in these situations, they can better support us in quicker hiking, in any other situation on the trail, basically. Very, very, very simple, but very, very effective. Now, when it comes down to it, strength training is a much, much, much more than just doing a few bodyweight squats and lunges, maybe doing some hip workouts, whatever it may be. You can get so much better benefits when it comes down to strength training for hiking than just doing this sort of, typical approach that a lot of people do. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not speaking ages, but I do have a cool new thing that I've just recently released, which I'll talk about at the end of the presentation for people who may be interested in learning a bit more about that. So that's number one. We want to get strong. We want to build up the capabilities of our muscles. Pretty simple. Now, to get a bit more specific, we want to talk about increasing speed and actually exposing the body to these quicker speeds and actually practicing this type of thing in our training. And the idea behind this is if we can actually go out and practice quicker walking and practice quicker hiking and get that into us, this can have a whole bunch of benefits. Number one, it can reduce our fatigue when we're going quicker. So when we're actually trying to keep up with these quicker hikers on the trail, we will get less tired. Pretty simple. It can help the muscles adapt to these types of forces. So, as I said before, when we're trying to go quicker and sustain this, more force we're having to produce, and sometimes this can lead to some types of aches and pains. If we can practice this and expose the body to this, there's less likelihood if you're trying to keep up with quicker people, you're going to get sore. And also going to help just the body and mind feel a bit more natural at these quicker speeds as well. So basically, we just want to just go quicker. Now, if you read that and you're like, all right, what am I, that makes sense, what I'm going to do. Left-brain devices, a lot of people are like, you know what, this is something that I struggle with. This is something I want to work on. So they're like, look, I'm just going to go out hike and I'm just going to go really, really quick every single hike. That's something that I've heard a lot of people do. And, it's kind of the first sort of thought process, but we can probably do a little bit better at this because ultimately when it comes down to if you're going out on your hikes and you're just trying to go quick the entire hike all the way, number one, it can suck a lot of the enjoyment out of our time on the trail. Like as much as we use hiking to train for these big adventures in this type of context, we still want to go out there and enjoy ourselves. We still don't want to go out there and have it being a chore. We don't want to like to just be an absolute full blown training session. We want to enjoy time on the trail, and this can sometimes get in the way of that. Also on top of this, if we are trying to do an entire hike and really pushing the speed, we can end up just doing too much too soon. And like anything, if we jump into this too soon, it can put us in a bit of a higher risk of, pain and sometimes injury if we're just doing too much. So we want to avoid that. And we want to slowly expose the body to this type of thing. So with that being said, instead of just saying, okay, I want to go a bit quicker, so I'm just going to go out and do lots of quick hikes. There's some slightly better ideas on how to go about this. Now, one workout I really like, which I use for a lot of my hikers, is something called tempo walking. And this can be a really, really nice workout you can start if you're trying to do this type of thing. Now, basically what this involves is it just allows you to expose the body to quicker speeds in a really, really controlled way, which typically isn't going to overload things, end up doing too much. Now, it's a super simple workout. It is not complicated at all. But basically all it involves is finding a short local walk. 30, 60 minutes, maybe around a park, maybe around the block, whatever it may be. And all you're doing is alternating between your normal pace walking and quicker pace walking. Simple as that. Now, an example of this is you might get a little timer. You might go normal pace for a minute, quicker pace for a minute. Normal, quick, and literally just do that for the entire 30 minutes. Now, this is a really, really good way of just practicing this quicker stuff. As I said, in a controlled way, you're probably not going to overdo things. Very, very simple. On top of that, it's just a nice way of getting a little bit more of a workout compared to just a normal walk anyway. So it's going to be really beneficial for aerobic preparations anyway. But this, specifically when we're talking about speed, this can be really good. And essentially like this, each time you do it, you can sort of you could potentially just go a little bit longer with the quicker intervals. So one way I like to do with my hikers, we'll do the first week, we'll do 1 minute slow, 1 minute quick, and they'll do that for lunch. Then the next week we'll do 2 minutes quick, 1 minute slow. Then the next week, we'll do 3 minutes quick, 1 minute slow. And step by step by step, we'll just do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Very, very simple, but very, very effective. Over time, you can even introduce a bit of pack weight. If you're carrying like a 5 kilo, 6 kilo, 7 kilo pack on your adventure, practicing this type of walking with the pack on your back can also be good. A couple of tips if you do try this. First time you do it, a lot of people do tend to get sore calves. You'll go out and do the quicker walking and the calves, lower bit of your legs can get a little bit sore. That's pretty usual. It's not that big a deal. It typically only happens the first time you do this workout, just as that area gets used to this type of thing. But if you do have a history of like foot pain, Achilles pain, or something like that, and you do it and you're like, oh, this didn't feel great, this may not be the right workout for you. But aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. So that's tempo walking. Very, very simple. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is fartlek training on your hikes. And this is just a fancy way of talking about a certain type of workout, but it can be a really, really good way to introduce this type of stuff into your walk, into your hikes. Because when we're obviously walking around the neighborhood and when we're walking on hikes, a little bit different in regards to, demands, because it's not nice and manicured. Obviously, there's different things. So essentially, when we're practicing this and thinking about keeping up quicker hikers, we want to expose the body to quicker speeds on the trail as well. Now, this can help us feel a bit more capable, confident on this type of terrain, and just make it a little bit more simple. Now, a lot of people, you can do that type of tempo walking on the trail, but a lot of people will find like, hey, I'm out in the middle of nature, I'm having a good time, and I got to look at my phone or do timing and this and that. It just ends up being a little bit of a pain. Or sometimes like the time comes up to go a bit quicker and you're like, oh, this is a really dodgy section of the trail. I don't really want to go quicker. Sometimes it's just a little bit tricky. So this fartlek training can be pretty good. So basically what it involves is, a lot of people will naturally fall into this, but when you're hiking, you basically just choose a landmark in the distance and you're hiking along, you're like, hey, there's a nice big tree there. And essentially what you do, you just go really, really, really quick to that landmark. And then basically when you get to that landmark, you just go normal pace for as long as you want. To the next landmark until you recover, whatever it may be, and you just kind of chill out on whatever it is. And then essentially you choose another landmark, go really, really quick, and away you go. This is just a really, really simple, hands-free, technology-free way of just introducing this quicker speed on the hikes. Works out really well. And the idea behind this is over time, like week by week by week, you just do a little bit more of this in your hikes. So 1 week you may do 4 of these over a period of hiking, and that's enough. Then the next week you might do 6, and the next week you might do 8, or however often you're hiking, or whatever it is. Very, very simple, but it works out pretty well. So they're the 2 things I tend to lean on most when it comes down to practicing these quicker speeds. I really, really like those. Sometimes if people are like really, really, really trying to hone in on this, and they're like, hey, this is a massive concern for me, it's a real worry, this extra thing can work. Or alternatively, if someone's like, hey, actually, I'm the type of person who really loves numbers. I really, really like, seeing progress tracking and work with numbers very well. This can work out pretty well. They're basically timed hikes. So essentially, And this is a nice way of exposing the body to just continuous quicker speeds. So where you're just going for long periods slightly quicker than you used to, and also using a track your progress over time. Essentially, what this involves is finding like a short local trail. You don't want to do this for like a 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 hour hike because it's just a bit long, but something short. 2, 3 hours works out pretty well. Something local, something easy. Track should be pretty simple, so it shouldn't be a super complicated track. Shouldn't be too like convoluted. Very, very simple. Put a timer on, start the hike. And then essentially you just go and try to complete the hike as quickly as you can. It doesn't have to be an all-out sprint. It's not like you have to do as quick as like, literally running the whole way, but just, intentionally try to push the pace a little bit. And then at the end, take your time. And then essentially the idea behind this is every 4 to 8 weeks or something like that, you just try to beat your time each time. You don't want to do this every single week because again, it can just suck a lot of the fun away from things. But, this can work out pretty well every once or twice, 1 or 2 months, practice it. And then in amongst this, when you're not doing this, just go out and do your normal hiking. Works out pretty well. Now, if you are doing this, a few tips. Number one is just make sure you do find a hike or walk which is easily accessible, it's easy to return to, because when we're timing stuff, we kind of want to make sure we're doing the same thing each time. So don't choose something you have to travel like 5 hours to get to because it's not super practical, but something nice and easy. And also when you're doing this, try to give yourself some reminders to try to keep the speed up. Because if we're doing this and we're not paying attention, the second we stop paying attention, we will just go back to that natural speed. It'll just happen. So I quite like, writing a note on my hand and, it'll be there. Some people will put reminders on their phone or a little alarm. I don't love that on the trail, but some people have done it. Just anything that's going to remind you. It works out pretty well. Now, the final thing in regards to this whole concept of increasing your speed on the trail before we get to the sort of on-trail strategies with the training, with the actual hiking, is specific hiking challenges. So we talked about increasing the capabilities of your muscles to go quicker, which is getting strong. We've talked about just practicing this quicker walking through the tempo walking and the fartlek training. For some people, they may be aware that, like, realistically, I'm kind of pretty good for like 75%, 85% of my hike. But there are certain sections of hiking where I just slow down to a snail's pace. And there's certain sections of my hiking where I just really, really struggle. These are typically like a lot of people with descents and like steep descents or rocky descents. They get a little bit nervous. They feel unstable. They feel unbalanced. It can end up being a bit tricky. So if you ever are aware that any of these types of things do cause you a bit of trouble, then we can sort of look into the idea of specific hiking challenges and training this. And essentially what you're doing here is basically looking at the things that you really, really struggle with in regards to speed and practicing this in a controlled environment. So typicals of this, as I said, might be descents, might be rock scrambling, might be river crossings, whatever it may be. Now, if you were aware that there are certain things that cause you a little bit of stress, what I typically recommend is just trying to find some way of practicing this in a controlled environment. So in the example of descents, if you really, really struggle with this, a really good way of going about it is going out and just trying to find a nice steep hill locally, if you can. This might be in a local park. This might be like on a big old road. It might be just a super close hike, which isn't like whatever it may be, but just a steep hill locally. And essentially what you do is you climb up to the top at whatever normal pace you want, and then you go down at your normal pace. And the first time you do it, you just go down at your normal pace and you time it. Then essentially what you do is you do it again, but this time when you go down, you just try to increase your speed by 5 seconds. Simple as that. And you intentionally just try to go a little bit quicker. And then you go down to the bottom, climb back up to the top, and then go down again. And this time, again, you just try to increase it by like 5 seconds or so. And essentially the idea behind this is you're just slowly challenging the body to this type of thing, challenging the mind to this type of thing, doing it in somewhere that's not the middle of nowhere where you're in the middle of your hike, you're like, if something goes wrong, I'm in trouble. You're still pretty local, so it should all be good. The same thing for rock scrambling. You might be like, hey, we can go down a local beach and walk around the headland. And we might say, hey, I'm going to walk around the headland time it, and yada, yada, yada. This may take me 10 minutes. Then I go back and I'm going to try and do it in 9 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that. And just trying to seek out these specific challenges and give it a go. Now, if you are doing this, one thing I will say really, really, really important is don't go crazy. When I was sort of saying, hey, you want to beat your time by 5 seconds or beat your time by 30 seconds, very, 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 very small. We're not like we're trying to hustle down the hill. We're not racing down the hill, but we're just trying to do little increments. Because this type of stuff, if we are nervous about certain sections, if we're nervous about certain things, that's probably for a reason. There might be something that's causing that nervousness, and we don't want to go too crazy, but we just want to slowly but surely do it. And it can work out pretty well. So that's our training. Get strong, tempo walking, fartlek training, maybe timed hikes, maybe some specific hiking challenges. That's the whole concept of improving our speed. So when we actually get out on the trail, we can actually go a bit quicker and sustain that speed for a little bit longer. Um, yeah, and all of that stuff is still going to be pretty good in regards to general training. Next up, we want to just talk through some on-trail strategies and basically just some simple stuff that say, hey, your hike has actually come along, whether it's a weekend hike, you're out with a group, or whether it's like, your big hike with Camino Women, your hike has come along. What can I do to keep up with people? Basically, there's two things we're going to talk about, conversations and fueling. Both of them very simple, but incredibly powerful. Now, conversations is a funny one. And I never used to talk about this. For years and years, I used to talk about increasing speed and this and that. And it was never something I really explored. And then probably like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I had just so many conversations with hikers who were struggling with this type of stuff. And this came up more and more and more. And that's definitely something I like to highlight now because it can be really powerful. Basically, if you are a slower hiker, if you are a naturally slower hiker, if you are worried about keeping up with other hikers, a simple conversation can be the most powerful tool you can use. It can sometimes be a bit tricky to approach. It can sometimes be a little bit tough, but making the effort here can be really, really powerful. Now, in a situation, if you are going out with friends or a casual group, so you're just doing your weekend hiking or you're getting out, whatever it may be, and you're out with a group or whatever it is, having a conversation and talking to people, really, really powerful. At the start of a hike, if you can sit down with the people and say, hey, you know what? I'm a bit slow. However you want to phrase that. You know what? I'm a little bit slow, like bear with me or whatever it may be. And sit down, or not even sit down, just say, hey, guys, bear with me, I'm a little bit slow. And then just ask them, hey, number one, would it be possible if I am the person who sets the pace? I am aware I'm a little bit slower. I'm aware I don't want to be holding you back, but do you mind if I set the pace? If you can have that conversation, if you can ask that question, it's incredibly powerful. However, that sometimes can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes people don't want to say that, fully understand. So the next thing you can kind of ask is like, okay, if I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't think they're going to be responsive to that, can you agree to meet up at certain points and just say, you know what, I am a little bit of a slower hiker. I'm aware you may zip off, but could we just sort of, hey, choose certain checkpoints on the hike where we kind of meet up? And I'm just going to do my own pace. We're going to meet up. We're still going to have a good time, but, can this work? Again, may not be practical in every situation. It may not be like if you're out on an isolated hike or if you just want to be chatting with your friend or whatever it may be. It may not be practical, but that is an option. Or at the very, very, very least, have the conversation, say, hey, you know what? I'm a bit slower. I'm probably going to be slower than you up the hills. Can we just make sure when I get to the hill, we have a nice rest at the top and we don't just end up me going all the time? Again, how are you going to phrase it? These type of things, again, it can sometimes be tricky. It's all right with like most friends. Sometimes the casual groups, like if you're doing meetup groups or hiking groups, can be a little bit tricky. But I promise you, if you can approach these and make this conversation happen, it's just going to make all the difference. Now, when we're talking about hiking tours, if you're going out with Camino Women, you're on the actual tour, typically, tours are going to look after you a little bit better on this, but we still want to approach this smartly. What I typically recommend in this situation is if you, again, entering a tour, you're aware you're a little bit slower, at the start, just pull your guide aside and just be like, hey, look, just be aware, I'm a little bit slower than some other people. More often than not, they're going to be fine with that. They're going to look after that and this and that. But it's good to identify it early, just so it doesn't play in our head. We get really self-conscious or whatever it may be. And it's really, really useful to have this conversation early because you can kind of set expectations, both for yourself, where they can be aware that, hey, you are a little bit slower and maybe someone's going to sit at the back and just let you do your thing and, they'll look after you or whatever it may be. And alternatively, they can also make sure, okay, the guide knows you are a bit slower. The guide knows, hey, you are going to be going a little bit this and that. But the guy can also be like, hey, there are particularly necessary speeds. So if there are certain times where I say we do need to go a little bit quicker, this isn't me just hassling you. This is a genuine thing. So just having this conversation, just highlighting this and bringing this up. And I'm sure Camino Women's got a particular process how you deal with this, but this is just like general stuff that I kind of tell my clients because I think feels really important. So general rule of thumb, with your friends, make sure you have that conversation, casual groups, try to have that conversation. I know it's hard. Hiking tours, just highlight it in the beginning. And it can just save so much mental stress, so much worry, and it's just so powerful. So that's conversations. And you're a team here. When it comes down to you, your group, your tour, your guide, everyone on the team thing is a team. You want to find the best thing for everyone. So, make sure it happens. Now, next up is fueling. And I talked about this in quite a bit when it comes down to, I think like we were doing like fatigue management or something like that presentation. I can't remember what we titled it. We went into a lot of detail here. So a lot of this is similar if you've seen that book before. But basically when it comes down to keeping up with quicker hikers, when we get tired, when we get fatigued, we will naturally slow down. So whether we're already a slower hiker and we end up having a slow down if we're tired, that's going to make things worse. Or if we're a normal pace hiker and we all of a sudden get tired and we're really struggling, we will slow down. So the whole idea behind keeping up with quicker hikers, if we can reduce the amount of fatigue that we experience on the trail. So not so much just increase our fitness and capabilities, which we were talking about before, which increases our potential, but also reduce like the downside by just making sure we don't get fatigued. This can go a long way. Now, there's so many things you can do for fatigue management, and I did do a whole presentation on this, so I won't go into too much, but snacking is probably the most simple and the most powerful thing you can do here. Basically, when it comes down to it, most hikers on their adventures undereat. And it's not a big deal. Like, it's not the end of the world if we don't eat enough. But it can affect our energy. It can increase fatigue a little bit. And we want to stay on top of it. Ultimately, general rule of thumb with this type of stuff is in among the meals you're having, in among your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, when you're having something pretty decent. We want to make sure in between those things, we are regularly snacking and regularly topping up our energy stores. And essentially, if we can top up our energy stores, stay on top of our snacking, this will just be so powerful in regards to reducing fatigue, making sure you have enough energy, and helping you keep up with people. And ultimately, also having a good time. Now, when we're talking about snacking, very simple. What we want to be looking at for our snacks, and this is specifically snacks in between our meals. We want to be looking at high carbohydrate, low fiber, low protein, low fat. Now, the idea behind this is it's going to be easy to digest and quick to absorb. So this type of stuff is kind of the opposite of what we talk about, like healthy eating if we're sitting in an office. We typically, I'm sure we all saw the TV ads where they used to do the old what was it, like the high GI, low GI stuff, and they're like, hey, have Weet-Bix because it's slow burn, release energy, and don't have this because it's quick burn, and like this and that. Yeah, all of this stuff that we get told about healthy eating general day to day, when we're sitting around the office doing nothing, it's basically designed for keeping us fuller for longer and making sure we're not having these big fluctuations in regard to energy, which is great when it comes down to day to day. When it comes down to eating and fueling during exercise, it's kind of the flip side. We kind of want food that doesn't take a long time to digest. We want food that isn't going to sit in the stomach and pull blood away from the working muscles to aid that digestion. We want food that's just going to be a quick burst of energy because we are exercising. Our body will be utilizing it. It's not going to be like, you're going to up and down energy wise. You are going to be using that because you're moving. So essentially what we want to be looking at here when we're snacking in between our meals, high carbohydrate, low fiber, low protein, low fat. So examples of that might be like, fruit, dried fruit, gummy bears, lollies, chocolate, whatever it may be. On the savory side of things, it might be like, white wraps, bagels, if you're just doing day hikes. If you're on the multi-dayers, it might be like pretzels or biscuits, stuff like that. Just really easy to digest stuff. And then in your meals, your breakfast, lunch, your dinner, you have something a bit more wholesome, which, will be provided by your group. And that's kind of what we're looking at. General rule of thumb is what we want to aim for here with our snacking is just to have a bite or two of something every hour if we can. So basically, it's not like you have to have a whole chocolate bar every single hour or something like that, but just little bite as we go through. And the idea behind this is just continually topping up your energy and making sure you have the best chance possible there. Now, a few extra tips on the fueling because, and specifically when we're in this situation, as we said, sometimes if we're a slower hike, we don't quite get as much rest as we'd like. We may not get as much downtime or we can actually stop and have a snack. So we basically want to make sure we are ready to fuel on the go. And make sure you have snacks easily accessible. So make sure you have a pack which has a hip belt, have some snacks in there so you can just pick it as you go. Another great option is just having an electrolyte supplement, which I recommend to everyone, really good, and choosing an electrolyte supplement which actually has carbohydrates in it. So if you look on the back of your electrolyte supplement and it actually has carbohydrates and sugars in it, that's a good thing. Because that's just an easy way to get extra fuel in, which is really easy to digest, doesn't take much effort. An even better way of going about this is if you can, again, and this is the concept where you may not be resting as much or whatever it may be, if you can put your electrolytes in your hydration pack if you have one, I really like that. Not 100% necessary, but it just basically means, again, I don't have to stop and get my water bottle out, but I get to sip and fuel as I go through. The only drawback for that is some electrolyte supplements you get, if you put them in your hydration pack, it can like stain it with flavor. It gets a little bit weird and it's not very nice. One brand I really, really like for this, if you went down this route, is Tailwind. It's basically a brand designed for like trail runners and that. Really, really great brand. It basically, number one, has lots of carbohydrates. Number two, it's very, very subtle flavor. So as opposed to the super sweet flavor that you get with stuff, which you get sick of after a couple of days, it's very, very subtle. But also, it's also very, very nice on the stomach compared to some other ones. But in this situation, it doesn't stain your hydration pack. It's quite nice. Only drawback for that, it is more expensive compared to your Gatorades, your Staminates. You might just buy in Woolies, but it's an option. Or you can just put like any old one in a water bottle, will do the job. And then finally, just practice this during your training hikes. This type of stuff, it is a learned skill of practicing your snacking, staying on top of your snacking and actually doing it. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of people. So you want to practice it when you're training hikes. So practice remembering to fuel. Put yourself a little reminder system on your training hikes. Okay, once an hour, I'm going to have something to snack. Practice fueling while you're moving. So actually practice having a bite or two while you're actually moving, while you're sort of like, not completely stopped. And learn that. And this can, as I said, can really, really help with a sort of no minimal rest conundrum. And then also just find out what snacks work for you, what you enjoy, like eating, because, our taste preferences can sometimes be different between what we enjoy day to day and what we actually enjoy when we're in a hot environment or a sweaty environment or when we're actually hiking or whatever. So practice that out can be really good. Now, a few extra tips. Let me just check the time. Oh, cool, right on time. A few extra tips just to finish this off is treadmill versus outdoor walking. Now, one thing that a lot of people, a trap sometimes people fall into, is they're like, hey, I struggle with speed. Hey, I can't actually go outdoors and do a huge amount of walking. I have a treadmill at home or at the gym, really, really accessible, really, really good. I'm going to do a lot of my training on that. I've got nothing against a treadmill. Treadmill's a really, really effective tool, really, really useful. But one thing you do need to be aware on is there is a difference between walking on the treadmill and outdoor walking, specifically when it comes to speed. Purely for the fact that the way that we produce our walking speed is a little bit different when belts moving between underneath us and when we're outdoors and trying to produce speed. It's not like crazy different, but it is a little bit different, and it's significant enough that it can get some people into trouble. So if you are doing these quicker walking sessions, if you do have the option, I would strongly recommend trying to do those quicker walking sessions, the tempo walking, whatever it may be, outdoors, and just get used to that. Use a treadmill where you want, do it on other sessions, that's absolutely fine. But if you're specifically trying to do this stuff, probably best if you can get it outdoors. And also on top of that is if sometimes people are like, hey, I need to hit a certain kilometers per hour on average to do certain things. I don't even think that's so much Camino Women, but it is some adventures you go out there or even some hiking clubs that this. Just be aware that the speeds you do on the treadmill are not going to match up on the trail. If you're doing 5 kilometers on the treadmill, it's not going to be 5 kilometers when you're actually out on the trail. There is a bit of a difference. So it is something that's just some people forget about. You do need to be aware of it. Next one's hiking technique. If you're doing the tempo walking, the fartlek training, the timed hikes, one thing I recommend is if you're intentionally increasing your speed, I recommend just trying to increase the speed and the power of each step as opposed to dramatically increasing your stride length. So what I mean by that is instead of taking longer steps, which we can sometimes naturally do, I recommend try to keep relatively similar steps to what we usually do, but just put a bit more oomph into each step. It may seem like exactly the same thing, but it tends to be if we do the super long steps and we try to sustain that for long periods of time, sometimes that can lead to some aches and pains. I like the shorter steps, but just a bit more can make a bit of a difference. And then one thing that can help when you are training this specifically is quicker pace music. If you struggle with this and you're like, hey, I'm always going slow or whatever it may be, get something that's a little bit upbeat, pop it in your headphones, and that can actually really, really significantly help. And you can even look up on Spotify, there are specific playlists which do different RPMs of music, which runners use and cyclists use, which will you can literally go to the beat. So you can kind of play around with playlists if you want, which will time you. It's pretty cool. It's very interesting. So with that all, I know a bit of information. I know I always yap on, but I'm glad I managed to squeeze that all in. A bit of a summary. If you're wanting to increase your hiking speed, if you want to make it a little bit easier to be able to keep up with your quicker hikers, making sure you're not getting super tired, not getting super self-conscious, and ultimately just going out and having a good time. Number one, try your best to get strong. Increase a bit of strength in your muscles goes a long way. Number 2, practice your quicker hiking speeds where you can. Tempo walking, fartlek training, great. Timed hikes if you want every once in a while. It's not necessary, but if you like that type of stuff, go ahead. Practice those specific hiking challenges where you can. If you're aware something you really, really struggle with, identify, find somewhere locally you can actually practice it and give it a go. On the trail, have those important conversations. They can be tough. Sometimes it's like jumping off, like, the high diving board. It just can take a lot of effort to do, but it's so worthwhile if you do it. And also snack regularly, stay on top of that, and go a long, long, long way. Put this all together and ultimately can make a genuine difference. And I've seen many hikers out there seen such a change with this type of stuff. And it's just such night and day when you can get out there and not be in that like mental state of like, oh my gosh, I'm holding everyone back. Oh my gosh, this sucks. Keeping up with everyone is just so much more enjoyable. So definitely recommend on that. Now, when it comes down to this, as I usually do on these presentations, talk about something which, further learning, which you may be able to help. Hopefully this does give you a little bit of an idea around how you can go about this training. Now, if you were interested in getting a bit of help on how to put this all together, whether it's specifically for speeds or just your general training in general, I've actually just released a cool new thing a couple of weeks ago, which is brand new. Basically, previously, I've just sort of had, hey, my free information, hey, I've had my online coaching, sometimes coaching, not really what people 100% need or really want to invest in. I've recently released what we call a do-it-yourself course. So this is basically designed for people who don't really need the full breadth of, hey, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, I'm going to be coaching you, but actually you're interested in learning about this stuff and putting together your own program. Basically, this course is just designed to teach a hiker how you can actually create your own training programs. So taking a lot of the stuff we've kind of talked about on these calls, but really just put in a structured way where you can actually sit down, just follow step by step by step by step, which is really cool. So ultimately, you can benefit from the structures and the strategies and methods, which have been really effective for my coaching clients, but just do it in a way which works for you and is obviously much more cost effective than having a personal trainer. What's involved in this is basically, number 1, it'll just sort of talk you through how to plan out training hikes and give you a really, really clear direction on how to follow that. Number 2, it'll give you like what we call a recipe list of great cardio workouts, which you can just pick and choose from, which can be really good. So including outdoor, home, and gym workouts, you can pick and choose what you want. It'll give you a really, really simple system on how to put together your own strength workouts where you can literally just copy and paste exercises into our templates to build yourself up. And it'll give you time-efficient strategies on how to help your body bounce back and recover in between sessions. And then also some valuable insights on around how to keep consistent with this stuff and progress this stuff over the long term. If you did want to check this out, you can go to summitstrength.com.au/do-it-yourself. On there, there's a couple of videos, talk through the program a little bit more, not the program, the course in a bit more detail. You can kind of get all that. In regards to pricing, it's about 70 Australian dollars, 47 US dollars, runs about 70 Australian, so pretty decent time, cost effective thing. So if you want to check it out, go to the website and check it out there. And on top of that, if anyone does have any questions from what we talked about today or anything in the future, you can just flick me a message or flick me an email and let me know. So with that being said, that is the presentation done. Hopefully that was useful for people, hopefully some ideas. I know I just churned through a bunch as I always do, but I always jam these with a little bit too much information. So hopefully that made sense. If anyone did have any questions, I can't see anything in the room right now. So if you have any questions, I've got a few minutes. So if you want to plug anything in there, I'm more than happy to help you out with anything you want. No, doesn't look like it. No worries then. So, well, if there's no other particular questions or no one particular questions for this evening, I think next month we're going to be doing one more for the year. We're going to be talking about time efficient training for hiking, which is a very interesting one. Obviously, coming into December with all the craziness of work and social and holidays and all of that. So we're going to be talking through some simple strategies around how to keep things ticking over during that time. So keep your eyes out for that. But aside from that, thank you so much for having me on. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone has any follow-up questions, reach out to me. Always happy to help. But aside from that, hope everyone has a lovely evening and we'll talk very soon.
Thanks, Rowan. That's awesome.
Awesome. Fantastic. Bye, guys.
Bye.